All right, Trade Pros, we are live for another edition of our midday or afternoon futures update. Let me just mute that sucker. And here we are. All right, welcome everybody. This is Mark checking in from the Trade Pro Academy headquarters here in lovely Toronto, Ontario. On today's date, which is Thursday, June 27th, 2019. Coming at you with the last two trading days of the month of June. And they've been pretty good trading days. So let's go ahead and cover some of the overnight drivers, just because our head trader George is en route back from Europe back here to Toronto. So we're not going to be having that YouTube update in the morning. We didn't have it today. We will not have it tomorrow, but we look to have it back, I think Monday or Tuesday. So just a little update with you guys there. If you're wondering why you did not see any updates on the morning, there it is. Morning will. So let's take a look at what happened overnight. I'm just going to cover some of that stuff just because George usually does so. But in lieu of that, let's take a look at what happened. A couple of numbers out of the States. We had GDP numbers come in and unemployment claims. Final GDP, the quarter-over-quarter figure came in at expectations, 3.1% versus 3.1% expected. Final GDP price index quarter-over-quarter came in at 0.9% versus 0.8% expected. And unemployment claims were a little bit of a miss here, 227K actual versus 220K expected. So that's what we got on that front. We also had... what are these numbers? The Q1 final GDP price index, 0.9 versus 0.8% expected. Core PCE quarter over quarter, 1.2% versus 1% expected. What else do we have here? We had the May pending home sales. The month over month was a slight beat, came in at 1.1% versus 1% expected. Year over year, however, was a pretty nice miss, came in at minus 0.8% versus 0.4% expected. And we also had the weekly EIA natural gas inventories. They don't really weigh on crude that much unless there's a big draw or a big build. In this case, kind of came in line with expectations, 98 billion cubic feet versus 99 to 101 billion cubic feet indicated range. So right in line with there, not that much of a knee-jerk in oil on the back of that. What else do we have? Iran oil minister Ghadban mentioned Iraq oil production at 4.5 million barrels per day. Too early to say if OPEC rollover levels should be at the same level. And that's really all that we've got on that front. We did have some news overnight that the FAA has grounded Boeing's 737 MAX planes. They found a new issue that has not yet been addressed by the company, and they will not look to lift that grounding ban until that new issue is brought up and addressed by Boeing. And so that has weighed on the Dow quite significantly, because Boeing in itself is around 13 to 15% of the actual weight of the Dow. Let's see, how is the Dow weighted? Yeah, around there. Sorry, Boeing has 11.4% weighing on the Dow. So that is the reason why the Dow was a little bit weaker to start the session. Most of the markets were above their pivots, I believe. Coming into the U.S. cash open, Dow was the only one that had traded its S1. All others had failed to make lower lows. Dow was the one that made the lower low, which kind of gave us the indication early morning that we might be seeing some weakness on the equity futures. And that's kind of what we've seen leading into this move into those 22s, which we're finding a bounce from at the moment. So that's some of the news on the Dow. The only other thing really for today's session is the start of the G20 meetings. So having that new squawk handy just in case there's anything with regards to, the China-U.S. trade war, any updates with regards to that coming out from that meeting, TBD, but you'll need to have a squawk in order to get on that on the right side of that today. So with that being said, let me jump off of the camera and get back onto my charts here. This is Sierra Charts for anybody new that's not familiar with our platform. Let me just find that, shift that off, and looks like it's time for a haircut. What do you guys think? Flow is getting a little bit too wild. All right, crude oil, 402,000, a little bit lighter volume than on average. Daily change percentage, 0.08%. It's really marginal. Previous day close was 59.26 yesterday. Last traded price, 59.43, gives us our daily change percentage. So lighter than average on crude. However, we've seen pretty good direction on the session so far. Nice little bid. And we've kind of been holding on to those gains despite selling off from the highs. We've been holding support in those VWAP around those 16s, looking to press back up to the top. SPOOs, on the other hand, are just finding some support now. Super light volume on these guys. And this is kind of indicative of the chop that we are seeing. Although it's been, you know, directional chop. Chop is still chop, and it's not the most fun to trade. And, you know, on average, 1.2 to 1.5 million contracts. We are at half of that at the moment. So no real surprise as to why these SPOOs are so choppy on today's session. Daily change percentage up 0.38%. Previous day close came in at your 29.50 and halves. We are last traded price 29s. That's giving your daily change percentage. That's what the volume is looking like. As far as the pivots, crude oil above the pivot point, below the R1, kind of holding a consolidation here. You can see we've traded those lows, pressed off those lows. Now we'll see if we can continue up to those highs. That $60 handle still remains a large psychological level. And, you know, if we hold on to that pivot, press above these highs in the 60s, I could see us, you know, making another 40-cent move up into those 60s. That's what we'll be watching for on CL. On the actual SPOOs, you know, we've got bearish structure formed here. You know, this breakdown, that was our lower low, LL. Rotation up, this was yesterday. We were saying that rotation up to the pivot, if it falls under, comes to new lows, that is our potential confirmation of that bear trend. And so we did get slightly marginal lower lows. Another press up higher today into R1 gave us another lower high as we press back down. So we are starting to form a consolidation, you know, a downside consolidation between those 35s and those 15s. You know, I am personally still a little bit bearish, have a bit of a bearish bias here. So until we get above those 35s, you know, sellers are in control for me. And I'm thinking downside is the side that's going to prevail. And the reason I think that is because, you know, since yesterday, we've had about 1,000 bids sitting down here at the 29.10s, and they've remained on the ladder for the better part of today's session. They've been on there the whole time since actually they left for a little bit and then they came back on. So that's really the level. Actually, that's overnight. Yeah, so this is current session. You can see they've been on there pretty much the whole time. And we'll see what happens from there. But at the moment, we are coming into resistance for the SPOOs right up into here. So if I open that guy up, what you will see is we've had a bit of a bearish run leading up into current prices. You know, there's a bearish run. Come in here, made those lows. There was a previous lower high. Came in, another lower high here. But we kind of failed to break below that low here, which kind of has us consolidating at the moment. So now we're just kind of waiting to see what happens. You know, as long as we remain below that high, as I mentioned, overnight high, previous day high at the 35 quarters, you know, your sellers are still in control. If it can get back up above this zone, I think at that point, we might be getting back towards the long end of the trend, jumping back on the long side. But so long as, you know, the market is below these 35s, 40s, I still think the sellers may come out and try to press this thing lower. So much so, you know, this is the level that we sold off from on today's session, all the way from those 32s down to those 22s, 10-point move. Now we're right back up there. So if this level holds and we get another move back down, I think we'll get that run to those 29.10s. Ultimately, that's what I'm watching for. Overnight lows coming in here, as mentioned. As long as that level does not break to the upside, I'm going to look for these 29.10s to get flushed out. On crude oil, crude oil is looking a little bit like this. So you are seeing, bid off of the open, or a little bit of a dip into the VWAP. Nice bid. Kind of double topped into these 59.50s, 59.60s, rotated off of that, where to right above the open, right above that previous consolidation. One bounce, two bounce. Now we're coming back up into that zone. So, you can argue that it's forming consolidation for a breakout of this zone. And I would be alongside with you, but I would not be looking to buy that breakout and be looking for another rotation back down into the lower end of that structure in order for that press higher. So up here, you could still look to fade. You can see that this level is what caused that sell-off. Came back up here, sold off again. Another time sold off here again. So we'll see if the third time around, if it'll sell off again. If it does, start licking your chops because an opportunity is coming. If it gets back down to these 15s to the 20s for another press higher. However, if it fails there, rolls back down here, and if it breaks below that open, that overnight low and these big bids here at the 58.50s might be a target for the sellers. So that's ultimately what we'll be watching for. Both of those ideas are anchored off of this zone right here. Whether this zone breaks or not, we'll go from there. All right, so that's what we got on both of those markets. See a question coming in. Perfect. Yeah, well, that's exactly what you got to do, brother. Just if you get stopped out on some trades, refocus, get yourself back in the right mindset. Focus on the next best trade. Identify, the zone where you'd be looking for that. Identify what you need to see in order to take that trade and go from there. As long as you're seeing structure, you're able to, identify what the current trend is, what cycle of the trend we are in, and you've got solid market structure. At that point, you really shouldn't be having that many problems. If you are being patient with market structure on your side, that's what's most important. So that's what I've got for you guys. Last order of business, if I can find it amongst my 1,000 screens, is right here. All right, last order of business, TRADEPRO Performance Index. Bam, there she is. Today's date, 66.67% were green. It's been a little bit tougher to trade these SPOOs over the last 2 years, since last Friday, I'd say. Yesterday was pretty nice, actually. But again, today, another choppy session. And at this point, it really, really looks like summer trading is coming into effect, with the exception of a couple of squawks or tweets here and there from Trump giving us volatility. This is what summer trading looks like. Tight ranges, seldom moves, but it'll stay in a tight range until you get bored of it. Then it'll move. Then it'll get back in another tight range. Then it'll move, etc. So summer trading is a lot about those ranges, just identifying them and trading those extremes. And so, we'll look to lead the team into that as we get into July. So one more day of June trading left. We're going to wrap this puppy up tomorrow. We'll see what the overall average is, but I would go ahead, fathom to say we're probably in the low to mid 60s on the average here. So another pretty solid month. Again, 50%, no days where we were overall red on the session, which is great to see as well. So that's just gonna be the wrap for today's session here. As mentioned, not expecting too much out on the economic front today. We do still have the Treasury auction. I believe that's at 1 o'clock. Again, shouldn't be too much of an impact on the markets. And we also have tentative bank stress test results coming out from the States. I believe that was set for 4:30 p.m., but it's showing me here as tentative. Looks like it got updated. So that's all we got for you guys for today's session. Let me jump back on the camera and sign out here with you guys. All right, so there's me, and this is me signing off. Hope you guys got some value from this update. Until tomorrow, good luck and good trading. If you'll be trading into the remainder of the session, you know the 3 rules: remain patient, remain diligent, remain disciplined. Sign off for me. Adios. Take care, guys.